Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. I'm doing this long pause because that's what we need to do. Welcome to the most fabulous 30 minutes of cyber entertainment in the entire known world. It's Morning Bytes with Violet Sullivan, Jason Rebholz, and me, Stu Panansky. This is our morning LinkedIn Live show where we talk about the most important cyber topics of the day. We talk about all things cyber, privacy, emerging technology, and everyone's favorite cyber insurance. Let's welcome our guests. She is the cyber underwriting officer of the Global Specialty and Financial Lines of the Hartford. Fun fact, this guest and I have known one another for almost 40 years. Welcome to Jennifer Birnbaum. That is a true statement.
That is a true statement. Thank you for having me.
He is the Senior Vice President and Head of Cyber, MPL, and Technology of Berkshire Hathaway Insurance Company. He's so smart that even zero-day exploits check in with B-Rob before going public. It's Brian Robb.
Thanks, Stu. Happy to be here.
All right. The views and opinions expressed here are solely our own and not those of our employers. We love emphasizing that on our show. Jennifer, we love to talk about what's going on in cyber. Let's start with you. What's on your mind this month?
So probably the same thing that's on every insurance carrier's mind. What's going on with AI and how it is changing how we think about cyber insurance and risk in general. There was a story last week in the Wall Street Journal on this, and it really just focuses what we've been thinking about, and I'm sure what all of you are thinking about as well, and our listeners, just fundamentally how AI is changing the speed of risk and what we need to do about it from an insurance perspective.
So what are some of the top of mind things for you then? Like how is that changing your perspective on things and how you look at the evolving risk?
I mean, I think first of all, we're thinking about how resilience of our insureds matters more than ever, right? You can't just think about something as a point in time assessment. Organizations have to be able to get back online and operational quickly, more than ever. They have to be better positioned to be resilient. And so how do we partner with them? And really thinking about cyber insurance as a risk management partnership between the insurer and the insured, and how to get them prepared.
It's interesting because I was just having this conversation this week on how ransomware really brought together the resilience and risk teams and the security teams. And I almost feel like we've kind of forgotten that like that was a really good partnership and we need to be thinking about it. So it's the first time I've heard somebody really bring this up in that context where it's like, hey, now that's even more important. So, when I was talking about this, I was like, hey, basically became BFFs before when we were doing this. Now we really have to become like a brotherhood and sisterhood to work in tandem, because to your point, like everything with this speed now becomes that much more dangerous. And like, as you were telling us about this, I was just thinking, I wonder if the recovery side is going to get harder because, can the attacker then automate some like countermeasures essentially to try to keep alive longer and longer to start to basically sabotage the recovery efforts, now that I've just given all these guys ideas?
Well, you always give them ideas on the bad side. They always come in and tune into Jason's YouTube. But I said that with kind of these AI chain vulnerabilities is there's still a manual piece. So even though you have something that it's automatically finding these vulnerabilities that can be linked together, patching is still like the most onerous part of being in the IT side, and going through and going, well, how are we going to automate that piece, or how are we going to look at that in a different way is a whole nother, I think, issue that we forget about when we talk about, we can hunt down and find these holes easily. Well, how are you going to patch them? I think the same thing you mentioned with recovery. It's kind of like that's that IT side, even combining security and IT to say you can point out the problems all you want, but someone's got to
right. And how are you going to be ready to do that and do it quick enough before they just take everything or shut you down, right? So
I'm wondering, does anything change on the underwriting process? Like, how do you assess that preparedness almost to be able to deal with that, then kind of the next stage of all these things?
Well, I mean, you have to, like, you can't just rely on questionnaires, right? You can't just rely on asking more questions. I mean, you obviously have to think about having your insureds have those fundamental protections in place, but you have to be prepared to look at their systems and partner with them immediately, because if there's a new vulnerability, a new 0-day, as an insurer, you could be the one that tells them about it and have a solution on how to partner with them to repair it before they get attacked, right? So that's one thing that you have to be thinking about, how to do that quicker, how to get to your audience quicker, how to partner with them quicker, and really just that risk management partnership, how to keep that in place, make them aware that that is what we're doing as cyber insurers, right? We're there to partner with them. We're there to help them become more resilient. So I don't know. I mean, it's changing quickly, right? And so we have to be able to adapt that quickly as well.
So I agree with you, Jennifer. I think it's something that's lacking in our market right now, though. There's a lot of the way we do business is transactional, and it's based on those questionnaires you're talking about. And it's whether it's a short questionnaire of 25 or 30 questions, or it's one of these gigantic ones where we get back 100 pages. They tend to be yes and no answers. There's really no in-depth probing of those answers. So an insurer can say, yes, we have a patching cadence. To your point, Violet, we get the most important patches done in 48 hours. Well, what qualifies an important patch, and what is the reasoning for that? And is that the case across your entire enterprise, or is that only in certain critical sections of your IT infrastructure? There's so many follow-up questions that we'd love to get into as underwriters that we can't. And to Jennifer's point, the moment we finally get a questionnaire maybe up to speed where we're asking the right question, everything's changed on us, and we got to figure out how to do it again. And
Right.
it's only gonna speed up in this new world of AI and, God forbid, 2 or 3 years from now, quantum computing.
Exactly. And I mean, especially if you're looking at the small business market, SMEs, I mean, they barely even know what MFA is still, right? And then we're trying to explain these more technical things to them, and so it's very hard to keep up.
I think that's where you talk about the different parts of the community that came together for ransomware, security, risk, resilient, all the things you mentioned, Jason. I think the other piece is that there's some part of the technical community when you go to RSA or some of these big security blogs and tech conferences. I don't think they realize the still ones that haven't even gotten to that step, because the vendors are called in by the IT person that knows there's an issue, but there's all these other groups that don't have anyone to flag down any of the vendors to tell them there's an issue. So on the insurance side is where you do see these ones that Jennifer just said. Like it's amazing, but there are people that still don't know how to answer that question about multi-factor authentication.
I would just add one thing by context. I try to make it a larger point about our culture in general, and bringing back to Jennifer's original point about speed. I get a blast about a new AI frontier model version coming out every few weeks. They're always promising some new feature. You'll see social media posts showing 10 new things that AI can do for you. And there's no way that humans can keep up with that onslaught of advancement in the normal course of business. I feel like I have my ear to the ground on this. We talk to our clients about their systems and their planning, and they're not even close. I mean, they're at the stage where they're just talking about how to adopt the right policies for AI and which technology is going to be affordable. much less how to advance at the speed in which the models themselves are moving and the applications that follow. So there's a sort of a human element too, and I think the analogy to ransomware is very accurate, because similarly, that technology is constantly advancing. That hasn't gone away. Malware hasn't stopped. The advancements on that continue. But as a culture and as an industry, we've avoided catastrophic loss. We've avoided those end of world scenarios that we've been on panels talking about in our careers. And I think probably as a group, as an industry, we'll be able to do the same thing with the risks posed by AI.
Well, I agree with that. And I think what doesn't get talked about is AI can be used on the defensive side just as much on the offensive side, right? And it's going to be there. It's a crazy new word, like new term, right? Artificial intelligence. It scares everybody. Artificial intelligence has been around for some time. This isn't new. We've been watching the progression of this for a while. It just now is in everyday life, and people can actually get Chat GPT on their phone, and all of a sudden people know what it is. But we've been dealing with machine learning and artificial intelligence for some time. To your point and Violet's point, we had a big shift 5, 6, 7 years ago because of ransomware. Thing was, much like this, we talked about ransomware for 3 to 4 years before the market changed. Everybody was aware of it. Some people,
That's a
yes,
good point.
some
Yeah, it took a
some
long
people
time
buried their
to
heads in
do
the sand
anything
and didn't want to hear
differently.
it. Other people, got ready for it. And from an insurance perspective, some people did very well with it. Some people got hurt pretty bad for a couple years there. But we rebounded and we've come out of it. On this side, I think we're kind of in the same spot. Our market has, it's gotten so soft and it's gotten so transactional
Right.
that while we can talk about this, like a lot of people aren't really asking those questions yet, but they're going to have to real soon. And the capabilities are there, right? To your point, Stu, I agree. There's a lot of customers we have that are just now starting to understand, oh, we have to get AI, we have to put policies and procedures in place. But I think that'll be a quick ramp up for a lot of them. And as long as we're asking the questions, I think we'll help them along that journey.
All right, Brian, let's stay with you. What story have you been focusing on this month?
I would say, honestly, for me, the new shiny toy would be quantum computing. I've done my first couple panels on that in the last month and a half, and I accepted the first one. I was like, sure, I've heard of quantum computing. I can talk about that, right? You guys all know that. We've done that many times in our careers. And as I went down the rabbit hole, it got both terrifying and fascinating. And it's funny, as we're having this conversation about AI, it's like we're just starting to figure out AI, and quantum computing is right on the doorstep. I think it might very much change the way we do business, and the outlook of what insurance is and what cybersecurity insurance is. I'm not saying cybersecurity insurance is going away. Data privacy, all that stuff is here, but it might look very different in 3 or 4 years. And it's something that is scary from multiple levels, but from the insurance nerd side of me, the coverage aspects of it, of the harvest now and decrypt later idea, just is terrifying.
Can you
So
explain
I have
that
a
a
quick
little bit?
quantum question, Brian.
Go ahead.
I want to
Yep.
throw out my question because I've heard, quantum computing being like the force that's going to help break encryption as we know it. And I see it presented on these panels as, worry about the data, harvest now, decrypt later. All of these worries are going into things that are encrypted, data point, static things. If I was a bad guy, I would go straight in the middle of a financial transaction and get straight cash instead of going for data and having to turn that into cash or ransom. Do you think that anyone is prioritizing where the bad guys are thinking as opposed to just because in cyber insurance, we always ask the company, where are your
Mhm.
crown jewels? And we've been talking about data because that's how everything, with privacy started to develop. Well, quantum to me goes straight back to the transaction part.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point, and it's something that has to be dealt with. I don't think any. So I don't want to say nobody's prioritizing it. I think people in the financial industry, I think people in the security industry are prioritizing that and thinking about that. I don't think anybody in the insurance industry is thinking about that yet. I don't think any of us have even started to really actually contemplate what this means for us, other than harvest now, decrypt later. Um, And even that, I think, depending on what room you're in, your level of understanding or even recognition of that term varies, right? I think, from my perspective, I look at the harvest now, decrypt later, all the stuff we're dealing with now with ransomware, with data infiltration, exfiltration, etc. Do we believe these criminals that they've deleted everything that we've had, right? Like, from an insurance perspective, if we just handled a ransom claim where they said, okay, you paid us, here's your key, we got rid of your data. We don't actually know that. We're trusting them. We're going to close that file, go away. 7 years later, quantum computing's here. All of a sudden, are they decrypting a whole bunch? Is that claim open again? Do we have a whole another tower exposed, the whole tower exposed? A lot of things that we're dealing with. But to your question, Violet, the idea of getting in the middle and breaking the encryption in transit and everything else involved with that has to be terrifying for our financial system.
That's what I'm thinking.
On
And I think the only good answer I've heard back was the financial regulators are so far above everyone else. That's kind of where we saw, PCI come in ahead, and I think that's where you have to put a little bit faith in, knowing that there's so much more highly regulated that they're going to
Sure.
be looking at the curve.
I agree with you. And there's some frameworks out there starting for quantum computing, and the
NIST,
the
right?
protections you're supposed to have. NIST has one, and I think we'll see it first from the financial sector. Almost assuredly, they'll be the first ones out with stuff to follow.
So if I take a contrarian view here, I wonder if it's not as big of a deal as we think it might be. Because I look at this as, okay, let's take ransomware actors, right? They're stealing data. The data they're stealing is not encrypted, right? At least the bulk of it. So essentially what that would mean is a company doesn't have to go down this path of trying to do true encryption, because most companies can't do true encryption anyway, right? It's full disk encryption. The only way that's going to protect you is if the attacker physically steals the hard drive, takes it back home, and uses a quantum computer to decrypt it, right? Then I might be scared. Even in the case of jumping in the middle of it, take the PCI example is a perfect example, right? You've got end-to-end encryption from the point of sale all the way to the bank at this point, right? If somebody's going to get in the middle of that, how are they going to do that? They're going to go and do a cyber attack the way that they used to do it anyway, right? And so it's like there's such a narrow use case that I think this becomes dangerous, probably more on the government side than anywhere else.
Yeah, like
that for your average consumer, I don't know. Like it's still it's almost the same issue with AI, right? It's like AI enabled attacks. It's still the same playbooks that enable it to get to the point where something bad is going to happen. And so I don't know. Like I actually look at it as, hey, maybe if there is encryption, well, maybe the defenders can use a quantum computer to go decrypt the data then. Like I don't know. It feels too far off for me to see that risk that it's going to materialize at this point.
That's a great point, and I appreciate your perspective, because usually that's how I sound about AI, where I'm like, oh, stop complaining about it. Maybe I'm just still too new in my journey with quantum where it concerns me. But I think my concern is less from a security perspective, and because, quite frankly, Jason, you're so far more advanced with me in the technical stuff. I don't even understand half what you said. So I think for me, it's from an insurance perspective. Do we have to take steps now to protect us for quantum computing because of the idea of a harvest now, decrypt later, or something else? Should we be asking about that? Should we be asking questions? Like we just got a question about what should we be asking about AI, and honestly, I don't even know what the right answer to that is. Like it's a lot of cultural questions, and how are you responding to this? And we're all learning how to do that. But should we be throwing quantum computing into those question sets as well, and trying to figure out what companies are doing to get ready for that? Because it is on the horizon. But to your point, from a technical aspect, I don't know if it's as scary as I'm making it out to be. It's more of a coverage issue that scares me.
I'm curious that from your perspective, like one thing you said just really stood out, because I think it applies to the AI side as well, is how far out does a carrier have to look to get these questions in place to try to avoid some of the future pain?
It's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, I think far out, but I think it's almost impossible at this point to start asking anybody about quantum and if they're ready for it. It would be a very select few customers that would even be qualified to answer that or have any response. And so, like, with respect to the AI questions, I agree with Brian. Like, it's hard to even know what we should be asking about that. And before this was an issue, it was like, stop asking so many questions, insurers, right? So we're dealing with that dynamic as well. And, continuing to add additional supplements to each policy will be a hard task for insurers to then sell their policies in the market.
Jason, the best question I've heard asked about this that doesn't ask directly about quantum is, tell me about your encryption inventory. What do you have where do you put encryption in your process, and what do you have encrypted? And I liked that because I was like, oh, people are starting to understand asset inventories and data inventories. Encryption inventories.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So I'm always super salty on encryption because to me, it's always the throwaway question. Like any company today should be answering yes to encryption because full disk encryption essentially is default now. And it becomes a challenge there. I will say yesterday, I got my first questionnaire ever that did ask me about how I'm preparing for quantum proofing my encryption, in which I immediately selected I'm not. Because that's the current state for me.
I'll just throw something in from a different
question. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
No, it's relevant because as the point of view of someone who's offering counsel and not underwriting risk, it is a bit of a different conversation. Our lawyers have also been to some panels about quantum and have read some recent articles put out by tech companies about quantum risk. And we're also wondering, how do we incorporate this into our guidance to give a holistic approach to our clients' security and privacy concerns? So in that regard, we do ask the question, but the response that we get is usually just blank stares with blinks, or from the IT community, it's more of a knowing grin. That they're IT, they're sophisticated, they understand, but as Jason said, they're not. It's more like science fiction than real risk. But they're worried about getting endpoint protection, not the quantum encryption. So we do raise it because we, like everyone has said universally on this panel here, that we collectively are in the best position to raise awareness of the risk issues to the communities out there, to the business community. When we have our conversations, if you're a broker, you should be raising this issue. If you're the insurer, you should be internally wondering about the future and how this is going. And as other lawyers, raise the subject and just make them aware, point them in a good direction. And then, yes, it might be a little more science fiction right now, but who knows? So that's all our input from a little bit of a different perspective on that.
One more ad though, because Jen and I were sitting in a quantum session a couple months back. And I think the thing that terrified, when I saw all the people from insurance around me, I think the thing that worried them the most was actually the plaintiff's attorneys and not just the threat actors, because the point was made that the standards started, like you said, Brian, the standards are already out there. NIST had, I think 2024 was the first standard. Plaintiff's attorneys are going to be looking backwards going, well, there was standards and like reasonable metrics that to align yourself with back in 2024. So I think the long tail piece is probably the scariest of the quantum.
What would trigger that? Does that require a quantum enabled attack for a plaintiff to go after that?
Yeah, that's what I think about. I don't mean to speak your terms, but that's what I was envisioning when you painted that picture. Is it's the future,
or a Harvest Now issue, like data that you thought was good, you thought you were done, and you put it off.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting.
So think about I guess in concept, wouldn't plaintiffs' attorneys be able to go back to every other data breach that they didn't win on or didn't get hurt on, and they actually go reopen the case?
No, but to come up with a new theory of liability on the basis that there's what you're saying is that there's a deviation in the standard of care. That's what we're talking about. So you're saying, as tech professionals, as corporate IT professionals, you're on notice now because of these industry standards that have been published by NIST and other publishing companies, that there is a risk and that there are steps to take as far as best practices today to do that. But that's true. That's not. I don't think that's nefarious. I think that's true. So if an attack can be demonstrated to be to the failure to abide by that standard that is in existence today, as we all just discussed, then then the plaintiffs will argue that that is a deviation from the standard of care that you should be holding yourself to as a corporate IT professional. And if there's damages that flow, the plaintiffs will argue that you should be responsible for those damages, the party that deviated from the standard. So
is there a reasonableness that comes to this? I'm just thinking like this is like me buying a bunker for fear of the sun going out in a billion years. Like, does that factor into this?
You would hope so.
Yeah.
I guess this is why we're talking about this, right?
Right.
Well,
we're not thinking about it now. In 5 years, we're going to be regretting it.
Right. I mean, there's no law that we're tying this to yet, but if it's just a standard of care, reasonableness would definitely be a factor, at least in the defense. So, certainly at this point, the average Joe, when you think about that from law school, right, is definitely not taking those steps. And that's reasonable, potentially.
So think of it, Jason.
I have a story to throw in here, Stu. I have one last story to throw in there. We all have like 4 minutes.
Wait, we're running out of time. Go for it.
So there is I heard it this morning. I listened to a security headlines podcast to figure out what I want to talk about. And today there was a phishing as a service platform that not only uses AI to create believable phishing emails, but the difference is it gives you that forgery ability and also gives you the ability to maintain access. So it's called Forge 365, and it uses like actual Microsoft processes to work through emails and be able to evade the email filtering system. So comes in a believable way and then either uses device code phishing or man in the middle, attacker in the middle techniques to get actual 365 access, and then keeps a browser extension live by refreshing the stolen login sessions. So we're talking about like persistence. We're talking trickery on the front end, and then persistence once it gets in, and now it's made it a platform, which is at scale. Just like we learned ransomware as a service became something that Jason loves the word democratized when talking about technology. He thinks it's wonderful. So this has democratized phishing so that it's now not something that people just need multiple people and multiple parts and technologies to. It's getting packaged together. Like, that's terrifying.
Hey, Jason, why don't we've been another couple of minutes. Terrify us with another story. Go ahead.
It's a similar thing. How are attackers incorporating AI into their attacks? So, we see that with Violet, right? It's phishing. Well, Sysdig just released a blog post with the worst name ever called Jade Puffer, because we can't have an attack without a fancy name. Basically, what they found, though, is that somebody used an LLM to automate I'll call it a primitive ransomware attack. They found a vulnerability on an external facing system. They were able to use that and then jump from there to another system, a database, and encrypt the contents of the database. And through the forensic analysis, what they were able to identify was that it was an LLM that was driving it. You can tell by little signals like comments in code and just the timing of it, so the compression of the attack. They saw that having a very just LLM-esque type thing. So this is one of the first ones that I'm seeing of an LLM automated ransomware attack. Kind of takes me back to the early days of ransomware that was starting pretty basic. So something to keep an eye on is, are we going to start seeing this apply to some of the larger ones over time?
So that's an interesting point. Like, because my worry isn't so much a larger one. Is this going to make it easier to just attack a whole bunch of smaller companies, and all of a sudden we're back to a bunch of $500,000 $1 million ransom claims over and over and over again?
Ooh, that's a good point. I didn't think about the ransom. I think you're spot on there.
Yeah.
It goes back to what we were talking about before on just the smaller businesses still worrying about MFA.
Right. I mean, it wasn't worth the threat actor's time before, but if you can just have an LLM work 24 hours a day, go after every business under the sun, why not?
Yeah,
Right.
commoditize ransomware attacks.
Well, and And like on the same side, personal cyber, like Interpol just had a big takedown of a bunch of people that are involved in all of those sextortion scams and like love scams. They recovered $287 million just from personal scams because it was such a wide operation. It was like this huge operation. We're talking, that's just in personal cyber loss. Like that's not
They found the
companies.
Nigerian prince.
Yeah, they did.
They must have found
Decades
a
of searching,
couple
they found
princes.
Well, we are just about out of time and want to thank everyone who joined us today. Really appreciate you spending part of your day and month with us here on Morning Bites. Big thank you to our guests, Jen Birnbaum, Brian Robb. Thank you for taking the time to share your insights and perspectives. This was a brilliant discussion.
Thanks for
Make sure
having
to
us.
follow Jennifer and B Rob on LinkedIn. Always follow Violet, Jason, and me. We'll be back next month with our amazing next episode featuring our special guests, the insurers George Abbott and Asymmetric Securities Pippa Thompson. We're looking forward to continuing the conversation at that time. Until then,